Hello and welcome to the podcast You're Better Than That, hosted by me, Hannah Miller, and my friend Zoe. Hello and welcome, Zoe.
Hello.
So today, this episode is come about because we were talking about the summer season and we've covered it before in bits and bobs, but we felt it was important to come back to in a specific way. And we're going to talk a little bit about the concept of rest.
Yeah.
And before we start, I want to just say that a few years ago, and it's quite ironic really because I have not mastered this, but a few years ago, I decided to read a lot of books on the subject of rest. Rest, Sabbath, rhythms, sleep, all of that kind of stuff. I did a bit of a let's read as much as I can on that topic in one go, which I've kind of never really done before. And the first thing that I found frustrating is that a lot of these books are written by a certain demographic. A certain demographic being probably middle or upper middle or wealthy people who are professionals and who are men as well, if I can be totally honest. Mm-hmm. And so there was so much in it that was really good, but I also felt that it was a one-dimensional understanding of what this means. And it caused me a lot of frustration because if we can understand what rest is as a concept, then it's got to be good for everybody. Yeah. Again, a bit like I talk about purposes for everybody, rest has got to be for everybody in some way, in some shape or form. So we're going to have busy seasons where rest is more difficult. We're going to have challenging times when we're dealing with huge events and our rhythms are wrong. But rest and the concept of rest and renewal has to be something that we can all engage with. Mm-hmm. And so today we decided we'd take some of the principles from a book called Rest by a man called Alex Soo-Young Kim Pang. And he's taken quite a scientific approach. And I just wanted to pull a few things out of it. But before I do, what do you think of this quote? If your work is yourself, when you cease to work, you cease to exist.
Wow. That's really powerful.
How much do you think we get tied up in our work being ourselves?
You know what? We've just come back from a retreat where we were forced to not be able to
you had no
anything.
Wi-Fi.
And it really did make me reflect and be like, who is Zoe outside of what I do? Who is Zoe? What do I enjoy doing when the day is empty and open? And actually, it showed me areas in my life where my existence is probably attached to work and what I do and being productive.
It's quite revealing, isn't it?
Exactly.
When we're forced.
What do you think?
Oh, it made me go, oof.
Yeah.
Because you could add into that not just paid work, but the things that we put on ourselves as the titles of what who we are, our roles and all the rest of it. And like you say, who are we when we strip all of that back? Yeah. When so much of our endeavour is related to, well, I'm doing this because of that. I'm doing that for that. Mm-hmm. I'm doing that for this certain reward or accomplishment or...
I need to get back to this.
Because of that. And when we're forced to take those moments, it is revealing. Rory Stewart on The Rest is Politics just went on a 10-day silent retreat. And he talked about, it's so uncomfortable. They're literally uncomfortable because they have to sit with their legs crossed for hours. I mean, if you listen to him talk about it, it's like literal torture. So I think that's quite an extreme thing to do. But anything where we're forced to pull away can make us feel quite revealed around what's really going on. And here's another quote. When we treat workaholics as heroes, we express a belief that labour rather than contemplation is the wellspring of great ideas and that the success of individuals and companies is a measure of their long hours. It's this idea that it's the busy award or the busy, we're going to get the most kudos for being the busiest and working the hardest, and that is where the best stuff happens.
I've got a question on this.
Go on.
Because I just wonder, I'm just trying to see the other side.
Yeah.
A lot of people that say that are people who...
are the other side.
Yeah, and have done the hard work
really
and
good.
are then living in
the
reward fruits of the labour and then saying it's not about that. So then how do we... Yeah,
how do we do that on the way up to where we're trying to get to? I think that's so true because... I mean, I definitely didn't need to say this to Jude as he was preparing for his A-levels. Jude, just do a little bit and then stop and have a break. I totally get it, because actually there are a lot of people who do reflect on this later, having done the other. This book is quite interesting because he's talking about the need for rest in order to do the other stuff better.
Sure. Yeah.
So he tries to put this argument that actually, scientifically, rest is connected to outcome. Not that we do rest as a reward for what we've accomplished, but that if we can get this right, arguably, we will get there faster and in a more whole way with better ideas. Again, another quote, rest is not something the world gives us. It's never been a gift. And this is so true. Like literally nobody sits you down and goes, oh, you've worked so hard, have a little, we're going to make some room for you. If you're a doctor in the NHS, nobody is going to notice and go, oh, you've done a lot of long shifts. Let me make you a coffee. Not going to happen. It's never been something you do when you've finished everything else. If you want rest, you have to take it.
Yeah.
I have lived 44 years so far not being able to get this in my brain. Apart from holidays. Like I am very good at holidaying. But I cannot compute in my head that I can't just choose to rest when I've finished everything.
Sure. Because
I'm never going to finish everything.
Yeah.
And my little brain on the daily, this is a massive challenge for me. So I'm looking at this again for my own good. He then finally says you have to resist the lure of busyness, make time for rest, take it seriously, and protect it from a world that is intent on stealing it.
Do you think that you, outside of sleep, have some sort of rest in your daily rhythm?
Yeah, I think I do. And I do think I've made progress. I still feel like I am in the life stage where that's going to be harder than it is for others. And so I've said this before, there are life stages where you are going to have more room to do that. 10 years from now, I may be a grandparent by then. Which is very welcome. But 10 years from now, I would imagine I'll have more agency over my time.
Yeah.
The thing is, we can think that and then we just fill it. There'll always be more work for me to do. There'll always be things I could be doing, even if, you can be a very, very busy 80-year-old if you want to be, reorganising your shelves and doing and not resting. And I mean, those things can be replenishing for some people. But I do think there are definite life phases where this is incredibly squeezed. And I feel like I'm in that moment. But I do think I fought for it a little bit more this year. I have a dog. I walk my dog. That is replenishing and good for me to do. I don't always want to do it, but it is a good choice.
Yeah.
I do read a book, even if it's 5 minutes. I sit and eat dinner properly most days of the week and sit with whichever members of my household are around. Those are definite daily rhythms that I don't want to discount as not counting as rest. Am I good at really deep rest and carving out time? I'm probably not. And I'm learning. I'm absolutely still learning about this.
Yeah.
Shall we pick out a couple of principles from the book?
Let's do that.
So the first one is wild, okay? And the first one is around this simple fact that on any given day, for our very best work, like the stuff that's the most important thing of the day, we've probably got about 4 hours of excellent quality. So we work 8-hour days, some of us 10, 12, whatever. But in terms of the best thing you can do, your quality thing, we've really got about 4 hours. And this has been proven time and time again. And actually, there have been so many studies that show that people who work 35 hours a week are half as productive as those working 20 hours a week.
Wow.
And there's something to be said about this, because I'm under a lot of time pressure at the moment because I'm doing extra work than I normally would be because one of our team is off. And what I'm finding is I'm being more productive because I have to be.
Yeah.
So things that could take longer are having to take less time. And there's something about when we boundary our work, time and time again, report after report shows that actually we still get the important things done.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, it's a bell curve. Like, we can't say we're only going to work 2 hours a week and we'll get as much done. There's a sweet spot. Like, you need enough time to get it done.
Yeah.
But some of it is extra time. And this is why people are finding 4-day weeks are working for them. Because they're finding that they're shrewder.
Yeah.
Shrewder? I don't think that's a word. More shrewd?
I understand what you're saying.
Yeah. More shrewd about how they spend that time, and they cut away the chaff.
Yeah.
Of what they do, and they just get better at it. There's loads of like prolific creatives, Maya Angelou, Stephen King, Ernest Hemingway. They all ended their workday after 4 hours of like deep work on a book.
Wow.
Or whatever it was they were doing. Yeah. Now, I'm just saying that does not mean we literally get up at night, start our day at 9 and finish at 1, but that we probably need to think about how much of the best type of creative work or the deep work of the day, whatever it is you do, we can do, and stop forcing ourselves to go beyond that.
Yeah.
You've probably felt this yourself when you've been deep into something. You know, we're trying to go, oh, let's do a bit more, and actually we just end up making mistakes or losing the focus. You know, when you're on a more creative day, do you find that it can peter after a period?
Yeah. Do you know what, actually, a good example of this is I was working a half day at a different job.
Yeah.
And we were going away after the half day, and I was like telling my husband, I really need to like do this. I really need to do this. And I was scheduling an email, and he was like, you just need to switch off because this is your like holiday time now. And I really fought back and ended up scheduling the email. And when the email came out, I didn't hyperlink any of the links
because you were actually
and I feel like, yes, there's human error, but I also think because I was so
you were ready.
I could have just done that when we got back, and I needed to have that boundary with myself.
So interesting.
But I was flapping and then made mistakes. Yeah. Because I was trying to push the boundaries, but actually was doing more harm. Yeah. So that's a good example.
Yeah, I think it is. And there are always periods of time where we have to get into intense, you know, deadlines come and we have to do things. But what we're talking about here is like principles for how we reckon our day should go. Yeah. And most of us don't have the option to just do this, and it's not the case of saying, oh, I've done 4 hours and now I'm going to go and lie in the garden for the rest of the day, because that's not reality. But it could be about how much am I trying to force into the most meaty stuff of the day, and do I put other stuff around it that's a little bit less mission critical and not expect myself to be able to perform at that level. 4 hours at a time, that's the first principle. And kind of coupled with that is this idea of that work. I mentioned this earlier, that work and rest are partners, not one leads to the other. He really pushes this idea of it being almost like a wave, okay? That you have the high and the low, and the better you are at resting, the better you are at working. I cannot tell you how difficult that is for my brain to compute. Everything I've ever been taught, everything I believe is railing against that statement. Yeah. I do not find this easy. I'm like, this is so good. This is so good. Rest is not the absence of work. It is the augmentation of work. If I don't rest, I can't play. And inside, I'm like, what a load of rubbish. Just push it harder, push it harder, push it harder. And like I've said, there are seasons to do that. And I think we've both agreed that sometimes people talk about this stuff when they're in a luxury of maybe financial security, a life phase where this allows them. But the principle of rest and work being in a relationship with each other, I really do believe is true. I just think I have a lot of unraveling of wrong narrative to get rid of.
Yeah. What do you think has formed that narrative?
Well, lots of things. I think my personality is quite sort of, things have to matter and I shouldn't waste time. I had a dad who had his own business, and my dad worked really long hours. I watched him do that. And sometimes I remember I used to think, I don't ever want to do that. And, the way that you do when you look on. And Dad would often come home at tea time. So he did come home. So Dad didn't particularly travel with his job abroad or anything like that. But he would come home at tea time. He'd go upstairs. He'd take his suit off. He'd come back down. He'd have his dinner. And then he would get his books out on the kitchen table and go again. And that was like a pretty much daily rhythm. On a Monday night he'd play snooker, and on a Thursday night he'd often watch comedy shows on the telly with me, because Thursday night growing up was always great quality comedy, Only Fools and Horses and loads of other things, the Mary Whitehouse Experience and so many stuff. And my dad loves comedy, so he would do those things, but he would be doing a lot of work around it, and every Saturday morning he worked as well. And I think I've been modelled from my parents, which I'm really grateful for, that my mum and dad really did grow up with very little. My dad especially grew up with very little. His parents didn't own their own home, and my dad did experience poverty. And he would say that hard work has been his route out.
Yeah.
And that's half truth. Like, you know, that's not the only thing. And so I know that is kind of in my DNA to think like that.
Sure.
And then the world rewards us. So at every point, oh, well done, you worked hard. And actually, hard work should be rewarded, actually. And I'm not going to, like, throw that away. And as a teacher, I would reward effort much more than I would outcome, because the effort somebody puts in shows kind of some of their character, and that matters. Where that's got lost is that it turns into this thing that you are what you do, and you are as you work, and then, you know, you mustn't waste time, you mustn't waste opportunity.
Hustle culture.
And then I am in the juggle phase of I am trying to do much with every day because I've made those choices. So all of that has added to my feeling that rest is something you do when you collapse, or rest is what people get to do who are in a different life stage. But if I can learn to see it as two sides of a coin, I think it would be really good for me. And maybe our listeners, it's going to help them to think it's not what you do as reward. It is literally part of the process.
Yeah. And you don't have to work to gain rest.
No.
Yeah.
No.
And then you're not just resting then to go back to work.
Yeah. It's just a rhythm. Like we breathe in and we breathe out.
Yeah.
You can't breathe out if you haven't breathed in.
Yeah.
It's literally impossible to do. You've got to do the both. And I think if we could see it like that, that would be really good. He also goes on to talk about what is rest. And he talks about this concept of deep play. Another thing that quite bugs me about rest is we can get very one-dimensional about what rest is. And there are loads of things that people find restful, and people tell them that's not restful or that's not real rest. And simply the idea of deep play is activities that we find rewarding, but they are taking on like additional meaning and significance for us. We're engaged, we find them passion projects, or we're personally committed, and they're not about an outcome or a reward. So it's playing a musical instrument and not thinking about, I'm going to go and do my grade 8. Not that there's anything wrong with doing your grade 8, but it's for the joy of.
Yeah.
I'm going to tidy out the kitchen cupboards because I actually like organising, it could be. Or I'm going to go and hike a mountain. Not to say I've got the accolade of climbing the mountain, but to just climb the mountain.
Yeah.
And that's what deep play is. It's when we remove reward and outcome measures. Instrumental play is the definition of when we do the opposite, that we are playing and yet there is a reason. It's because we need this outcome. And I did all my grades on my instruments, okay? I've got grade 8s in my instruments, and I worked flipping hard for those. And I also performed in orchestras, and I loved it. I don't really play anymore. So you could argue that it was too attached to the next rung.
Sure.
My favourite memories are performance ones. Favourite. Like, I can still, if I hear an orchestra tune up, I could cry.
Oh.
Just that sound of them all playing an A. I'm like, oh my gosh, like this is major core memories for me. And there's nothing, yes, there's a reward in performance, but there's not really. It is the performance in and of itself. So deep play is anything we do that is intrinsically rewarding and voluntary, like we're doing it because we choose. So again, a real question for people to think about is what could be deep play for you? It's voluntary. You're doing it because you want to. So actually, if you want to, I'm looking around my room. If you want to clean your room and it's a voluntary activity that you are actually engaging with, who's to tell you that that's not deep play?
Yeah.
And it's about changing the kind of the why and the sort of motivation, I guess, as to why we're doing it. I've got some work to do here.
Me too. I'm even thinking about how I don't do it loads, but I do enjoy running. Yeah. And how sometimes I'll say like I want to run so that I can get to doing a half marathon. Yeah. And I absolutely do want to do that one day. Mm-hmm. But you're so right. How about I just run? Yeah. Just because I enjoy it. Yeah. And just because it clears my mind without having to attach something to the end of it.
A really freeing thing for me. I mean, running is very difficult for me at the moment because I've got injury after injury. But a really freeing thing for me recently was just removing any kind of time pressures or distance pressures. Yeah. And just say, I'm just going to go where I want to go. Mm-hmm. And stop seeing it as I should do a better time.
Yeah.
or I should. And there is nothing wrong with people who want to do that. I really think don't feel being got at. But even people who do that, what about once a week just going out, leave your watch behind, or even if you are going to track it, take off the timing things. Don't let it tell you how you're doing, and just go for the sake of it.
Yeah.
It's for the sake of it. Do it because you want to. There's no real necessarily need or outcome or comparison that needs to take place, and finding ways to do that.
I love that.
Winston Churchill was an artist and like painted all the way through his entire political career for his deep play. Yeah. Again, don't have to agree with Winston Churchill's politics to recognise that he probably used that as part of his mechanism for thinking and coming up with strategies and solutions. So quick couple points. Sleep and naps. Okay? Sleep. We've got to recognise how much sleep we need. People do need different amounts, but it's 6 to 8 hours, really. I think I'm a 7 hours person.
Yeah.
8, I'd love. I'm not a 6. Like when I get 6, I know I've not had enough.
Feel it, yeah.
I can really feel it. And then naps, let me just get this right. A nap of about 25 minutes can be really, really impactful on our bodies. We have to put ourselves in the dark, get ourselves as quickly asleep as we can. So if I'm going to do this, I'll put my eye mask on, I'll put my earplugs in, I'll go into the complete dark, and I will set an alarm. And the trick is to not let yourself sleep longer than that. Yeah. Some people talk about having caffeinated naps. So they have a coffee just before they sleep. And apparently when you do that, you wake up. I mean, I don't drink coffee, so it doesn't work for me, but apparently like you are supercharged. Oh. It's called something. There's probably like some clever caffeine nap or something. It's called.
Coffee nap.
Yeah, it's called something. I'm going to Google it later. So think about sleep. Sleep is like, it's so fascinating to me that we have not evolved out of needing sleep. We've got to do it. Every single day, our body forces us to rest. Yeah. It's like literally hardwired into the body system. Yeah. Sorry, you can't do this. You cannot keep going. You will literally die if you don't sleep. Yeah. So maybe that's a clue to the importance of rest rhythms in our life.
But then it's so funny because I'm just thinking of students who will like pull all-nighters.
Oh, yeah.
And okay, sometimes there is a deadline, but also how in our brains we're like, gotta get it done.
Totally.
But actually, it's like resting, and that impact is greater than
and we can when we do that too much, we then begin to, I mean, if you watch any show where people are working in Citibank and things like that, and they're doing these ridiculous hours, they are filling their body with all sorts of stimulants in order for them to keep going, and they are going to hit a point where suddenly those neurons in their those neural pathways are going to go alert, and it's going to impact on them. Just think about the logical fact that we have to go to bed and we have to sleep, and we cannot escape that. It's part of the inbuilt thing for all animals. Yeah. I mean, there's one sat right next to me here, fast asleep. She models rest to perfection, this animal. She, I'll have a play, do a bit of work, but I've got lots of naps.
For those listening, what is the animal?
Sorry, for those listening, it's my dog. My dog Pax. It's just out of shot, so you can probably see her if you find us on Instagram. I'm just giving you a little stroke here out of shot, and if you're listening. Okay, so really, really quickly, one last principle I'm going to talk about comes from the book Burnout. We need about 40% of our day to be about restful things. So that could be sleep, 8 hours of sleep, then add in 20 to 30 minutes of stress-reducing conversation with somebody that we love, 30 minutes of some kind of physical activity, 30 minutes of mindfulness eating, and 30 minutes of just something that you love. And that adds up to 42%. Wow. So that makes it more doable. Although 8 hours of sleep would be like, incredible to get. And some people listening to this who have a new baby are probably laughing their heads off and think, 8 hours? I'd love that. So think about it that way. 30 minutes of something like stress-reducing conversation, 30 minutes of physical activity, 30 minutes of your mindful food and eating, your sleep, and then a 30-minute wildcard of something that might constitute deep play.